Hello, good afternoon. Just checking, making sure it is the afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's well. And if you're here super early, I can tell you're super keen to hear what Evelina has to say. God, started the session really well. Yeah, so thank you for joining early. If you are here, welcome. You now have me rambling for the next minute before we can get started properly, so it gives us a bit of time to allow everybody else to join. But yeah, thank you again. If you are here, obviously you can ask Evelina any questions at any point. I'm saying your name correctly, aren't I?
Yeah, it's Evelina. That's correct. That's fine.
I know obviously you're from Lithuania, and I know different cultures or countries will have different ways of saying and pronouncing different things. So I thought I'd ask that before we get any further.
Yeah, that's great. You don't need to bother yourself with my surname, but my name is perfect.
Yeah. Tell me how do you say your surname whilst we're at it?
It's Evelina Dzimanaviciute.
Okay, cool. I won't even attempt it, but thank you for saying it.
That's fine. Like I often say, just call me Evelina D, or anything that's shorter and simpler and easier. It's more pleasant to hear a shortened version than somebody trying to mispronounce it horribly. So
yeah, butchering it. Yeah, I'm not very good. My dyslexia allows me to read it as it should be. So I know it's DZ, and I'm not even sure how I would pronounce DZ in my own brain. But as I said again, if you are here already and we are going, use the comments and ask Evelina the questions you want to, or me the questions you want to, and we will answer them throughout. And obviously, the more engagement, the better this is for you, because it's all about the people here listening. So let's get started. Obviously, we're here talking about the topic of the value proposition of well-being within the workplace, and how looking after and supporting well-being helps an organization succeed and excel and perform. So really excited to explore Evelina's thoughts and expertise and knowledge around how we really share that and showcase that for companies, and what she has to say in regards to that. But before we start, I'm going to do a really quick introduction to myself, for the people who maybe don't know who I am and have come along because you're connected to Evelina. I'm the founder of Employers Health. I'm a high-performance coach and well-being coach, and podcast host, which is crazy to say now because it's now on Spotify. And I help organizations, senior leaders, improve their potential and perform at their very, very best. Whether you're a senior leader, whether you're an employee, whether you're a team, I help you guys or people in organizations achieve that. Plus a load of other things in regards to education and wellbeing strategy support. So that's the boring stuff and me out of the way. Let's get over to Evelina, hi, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, so I'm Evelina. I am a founder of Elite Mind, which is organizational development consultancy. We specialize in using behavioral neuroscience and human-centric research to discover unmet people's needs, and then use that to create insights to inform your leadership development, talent strategy, well-being initiatives, and to design workplaces that are ultimately good for humans, right? So that's who I am and what I do in a nutshell.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to you sharing the knowledge around the organizational change stuff and how we get the data and understand the data, so that, and also what the key data points are that we should be focusing on in regards to organizational change and improvement for people and well-being. So before we get into that, it'd be really good to hear how you've got there. So the journey you've taken to get to where you are right now.
Yeah, it's been a very, very long journey and not very straight road, really. And I kind of got here completely by accident. This is not something that I would have ever imagined that I'm going to end up doing this. So I'm originally from Lithuania. I came to UK now I think 20 years ago. I was just straight out of school. I came here to UK just for short summer holiday. I never planned to stay here. I had happy life back at home. I had fully funded government funded place in Lithuania's best university. So, there was not even a slightest thought that I would not go back. But yeah, at the time I got myself in a very strange situation where, we, with my partner at the time, we got ourselves in a situation where I kind of decided that we're not going to go back home as we have no choice to go back. And yeah, it was quite a scary beginnings because, one day you are, happy kid at school, studying at uni and having awards and having happy life. And then next day you wake up in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you don't have family, you don't have money, you don't have belongings because, you've not planned to move here. And now you're like, okay, you have to create new life and new work here, your new beginnings, right? So yeah, I was very stubborn and very naive, I guess. At that age, you believe that, you can have it all and you can do it all. And I never questioned myself in terms of can I do it or not. It was only, how can I make myself in this situation? How can I prove something to myself? But that also meant that it was very hard. Like those first few years was really, I was working, 80-hour weeks at several jobs. I then studied English to learn the language so I can go to university. Then I also got pregnant, which was like, yay, let's do it all. And yeah, so I ended up having, these crazy few years where I was working at several jobs and then studying at university while raising a child. And then on top of that, I also felt very guilty that I'm kind of, left my country and left my family. So to soothe my guilt, I went to volunteer for a charity called Matri that works with suicidal people. There were no hours in my day, so I used to do night shifts to volunteer. And I think when I was there that it really hit me that, despite all of the circumstances and kind of the way I was going through life, I never felt like I don't want to live, right? I always felt like, okay, that's happens what happens, and I learned something out of it. And how can I become better? How I can learn? And I never questioned, whether I want to be here or not. So when I found myself in this respite center, kind of surrounded by these very vulnerable people, I was full of questions in terms of what makes a difference, why certain people, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, you will know some people that, you place them, you can take two people and place them in exactly the same kind of pressure cooker environment, right? And one of them will go, yay, I'm going to grow and learn with this. And, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger kind of attitude. And the other person will end up stressed, depressed, not wanting to live. So for me, I kind of, in a way, I learned to appreciate my own kind of upbringing and the level of resilience that I had and the way I was able to go through those challenges. But also when I was in that environment, it made me incredibly guilty because it felt like I have something that these guys need so much, but I don't know what is it that I need to give. So I think that really kind of prompted me to research everything I can get my hands on about human behavior and psychology and neuroscience of, what makes us human, what makes us happy, what makes us resilient. So I've spent, nearly 20 years now researching, these different aspects of resilience and what shapes our health, our levels of happiness, our well-being, and all the different kind of contributing factors in that. I used that in a therapeutic setting. So I ended up specializing in one-to-one practice, supporting people who kind of couldn't be helped through traditional medical routes. So people who maybe been in therapy for 10, 15 years, who have multiple mental health diagnostic labels, people who suffer with chronic illnesses, with psychosomatic disorders. So I end up helping them through kind of understanding of their own nervous system and how their mind, brain, and body kind of learns to react and respond to the environment, and how we can change that. But alongside that, in my corporate career, I was working in leadership development, management. I was helping companies scale by developing their talent internally. And I did all of that until at some point I ended up burning out. And the big lesson for me was that my strong mindset and the attitude of I can do it, and always saying yes, actually made me blind to my own needs of my own body. And you can have very positive mindset, but actually positive mindset does not equal resilience. Sometimes it can really make you blind to what your limitations are, and you kind of push through that. And burnout was not enough. I still continue working as I did, so I ended up having a tumor. And that was a big wake-up call for me, because when you sign the agreement the night before operation that I agree with all the consequences of this operation, including my own death, then it really makes you reflect on everything that you've done so far. And you think like, I built this new life and certain level of success for myself in a foreign country, where I arrived without even speaking the language. And, but at what cost have I created the success, right? Sacrificed my health, my relationships, my, doing things that I love, not spending enough time with my little daughter when she was growing up, right? And I was thinking, if this is really my last day, what is she going to remember of me? And, all is she going to be able to say is that mommy was always working, right? And obviously that's not, those kind of realization moments really, really hit you hard. And so I think after that, it really changed my motivation towards work, towards performance, towards well-being. And I had to go on my own kind of self-discovery journey to find how do you kind of create that high performance and success in a way that doesn't come at the cost of sacrifices. And I think that was that journey, that's what inspired me to then establish my consultancy, Elite Mind, where I'm trying to kind of balance those conflicting extremes, right? On one hand, like working with very vulnerable people, on other hand, you're working with high performers, leaders, athletes who are always pushing those limits. How can you really bridge the gap between the two, and look at how can we create healthy working environments in a way that drives performance without individual sacrifices? So
Wowzers. What a journey. I made a few notes just because there was so many interesting little bits. But I'm going to reflect on the last bit there around experiencing your burnout. And I think, and the way that you dealt with that burnout, it feel like it's a story which you hear quite often. It's maybe people being blind, and then you see this within the health profession as well, people being blind to the impact of how we live.
Yeah.
Experience a health issue, whether that's burnout or whether that's a physical health issue, a stroke, whatever that might be, right? And then change happens. And it's a story I've heard too often within the physical health one. Now, obviously, being in the world of work, that it's also another one with burnout. People go through that. And by sounds of it, your resilience, and that's another section, obviously, being more resilient, having a mindset, being positive, all that kind of stuff, and being able to do the amount of work that you were doing and being resilient through that. You can see how, you can interact and find the difference between the two. It's an interesting story. I
think anything that is good taken to extreme levels will become bad, right? You take anything, high performance at whatever level, at whatever activity, I think it's all about balance. And really, understanding the limitations of our own kind of brains and bodies, because we live in this world where we, so kind of like head driven, right? It's just like you set the goal and you kind of go for it and you can achieve it. But of course, that's not how we operate, right? From neurobiological perspective, we are really driven by a lot of kind of subconscious autonomic routines and habits and subconscious brain patterns, right? Some of them stem from, millions of years of evolution, right? And the way we live and the way we work in the modern world is really against how we have evolved to thrive over millions of years. And that is one of the biggest causes of poor mental health, of such a huge levels of stress, such a huge levels of suicide rates, right? Because our environments are just not designed for humans, right? We are completely dismissing the huge area of what does it mean to be healthy, to be happy, to perform. And there's a huge area of kind of these evolutionary needs that we are dismissing. And I think we have to consider those if we want to do well-being right, if we want to build, well-being in organizations. We have to kind of take more of that human approach, and this is why we're using this evolutionary neurobiology and a lot of kind of human-centric research in our work, because without it we are just widening the gap between what is good for people and economic outputs of the business.
Yeah, and there is a crossover between the two, right? Like if you get what's good for the people and what's good for people performance, there's a big output in regards to the economic success.
Yeah, well, it depends actually, right? Because when you look at a lot of research, you kind of have this continuum where, you could see, let's say, a graph, right? Let's say on one continuum you have, organizational performance. On other hand, you have like individual well-being. Mm-hmm. And actually there is some sort of a sweet spot in the middle. Because if you take well-being too far, you end up having this kind of, happy, clappy, hippie environment where everyone's happy, everyone's cheering and so on. But actually performance drops at that level. When you push performance too far, then of course you have, huge levels of stress and burnout and, all of these kind of like toxic behaviors and people leave and struggle to be their best. But certain level of pressure is needed for them to perform. So it's not actually equal continuum. It's not that, the more you increase well-being, the more you increase performance. It's actually, you can take all of your wellness and well-being initiatives too far, and it can be damaging to performance. So this is also very, very important to realize. And there's a lot of, things where I see things are being done wrong is with this kind of attitude of just creating this kind of superficial tokenistic behaviors that are, people like it and, we are happy, but actually, is it really good for us, right? Is it good for business, right? There's a lot of human behaviors in our nature that feels good for us, but it's that feels good, but are really bad for us, right? Eating unhealthy foods, drinking alcohol, whatever that is, all of this kind of like quick pleasure searches makes us happy, but is it good? So I think there is also the paradox here that if we just ask people what they want, they don't necessarily gonna know what is good for them, right? They're just gonna say what they like. And that's also a very important aspect of kind of like understanding all of these drivers for health and well-being and knowing what is it that we choose to measure if we want to drive performance at individual and at business levels.
Fantastic answer. So I'm going to lead with my first question. And so what is positive well-being at work?
Yeah, what is well-being at work? So I think before I kind of give that definition, I think it's also very important to differentiate between well-being and wellness, because I can see this misconception and those words are being kind of used interchangeably all the time, but actually they're different things. So when we look at well-being, this is a kind of wide ecosystemic concept of how happy I am with myself, with my life, with my work, with my relationships, with my health. So that can be affected by a lot of factors, right? It can be affected by your work, can be affected by relationships at work, can be affected by economic and political climate, right? So there's a lot of things that will influence that kind of like state of being in the moment, right? When we look at wellness, this is actually a practice of self-care. How do I maintain? What are the habits, behaviors, and routines that I go to practice every day that will then contribute to me having that better well-being, right? So wellness, when you think about wellness, I want you to think about self-care. It's habits and routines of self-care. So this is your diet, your going to the gym, your yoga class, your good sleep routine. This is wellness, right? But well-being is so much more than that, right? And it's really important to realize that if you want to create good well-being, you cannot just engage in wellness initiatives. And this is the biggest thing that I see happening all the time. Companies say, I have well-being strategy, but actually this is just your gym membership and yoga class at lunch and so on. So none of those things will save you from toxic working environment and from abusive relationship or any of those things that really affect your health and well-being. So I think that's kind of a huge, big definition that's very important. What well-being means to me, it's ultimately the way I look at organizational well-being. For me, it's through my work, I want to use organizations as health interventions. So well-being means having all of the tools and resources to be able to perform and thrive in face of life's challenges and stresses. And having that right environment for that is crucial for that, because you can have the strongest, the most resilient person, you can place them in a toxic working environment. There is still limitations on, how well they can perform. Another way around, you can take the most vulnerable person with a history of mental health issues and so on, you place them in a very supportive environment, and they're still going to do well. So for me, I think organizational well-being is that relationship between the individual state of well-being and the environment which enables that to happen.
That's such an awesome answer. And I think it explains kind of our behaviors and the things we do for our own personal. So I call that your wellness, I would call personal well-being. And then your second response to the organizational well-being, I think just claims it perfectly, but being able to differentiate between what we do for ourselves as wellness, and then how we feel about places, and then the role of an organization and the impact they have on the human being, and how companies need to look at well-being is really important. And I think you nailed it spot on. So thank you for sharing that answer. I think I'm just going to notice the comment. I think it was Lisa. I can only see a LinkedIn user as the title, but from the link you've sent, I think it's you. Can you see that, Evelina?
Oh yeah, I can see now. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't have it before. Now I just clicked it on it. I can see. Yeah.
Is that Lisa there?
I cannot see the name, so just LinkedIn user. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. I've looked at that afterwards. So how does a positive working environment or that organization, a good positive organizational well-being, as you just explained, impact the workplace?
Well, I think you need to look at how it impacts people and how it impacts the business, right? Because I think those are two different things. Like we said, we can take it too far and we can only look at kind of humans and what's good for them. We need to make sure that we're kind of having that balance right. And I think there's so many discussions about how what is the value of well-being at work and what's the ROI of well-being. And I think it's really important that we don't just look at ROI, we look at that VOI, right? The value of well-being and the value of investment that we are making, because not everything in well-being should be measured in kind of financial returns. Yet it is possible to do that, right? So I can share a little bit more in terms of how do you build a case and how do you measure that. But before that, I think it's very, very important to recognize that we often reduce well-being to something that is, unless we have this hard evidence, we end up reducing it to this fluffy well-being, that doesn't really give any returns. And there's a lot of information where actually like 70% of executives, for example, believe that their well-being initiatives are doing good. But when you ask them to provide evidence for it, only 26% of them can actually pull up some stats and figures to provide evidence that, this is the initiative and this is the impact of that initiative, and I know how to measure it and how to prove it. So there's also been like stats about this, I think, from Vitality Health, that only 9% of employers actually measure ROI of their well-being initiatives. 59% said that they want to do it, but they don't know how. And I think this is, this really sums it up a lot in terms of the challenge that we are having here, right? I think well-being is still very new industry. It still doesn't have, clear definitions. Well, I mean, when I'm talking about organizational well-being, right? It's still quite relatively new. We don't have very clear measures. We don't have very clear definitions. We don't have clear processes for how do you design well-being strategy that works for you? How do you measure success for it? So we've done a huge piece of work with Elite Mind in 2022. As you know, Richard, we've got funding from Innovate UK to design the framework for it, to kind of show what good looks like and to design the step-by-step implementation roadmap for how to build your own well-being strategy and how to then measure success out of it. So I think we are often overcomplicating a lot of things. And if we really look at what makes a difference to people and what makes a difference to the business, based on what really matters to us right now, based on, where are we going here? What are we trying to achieve? And we truly listen, then we can come up with a set of very precise measures that will be very individual for each business to still illustrate that what we are doing makes a difference, and it makes a difference to how people feel, it makes difference to what people know, and it makes difference to how people behave, and behaviors always translate to specific outcomes that will have a specific pound figure attached to it.
Awesome. I can hear your dog in the background.
Yeah,
that's all right. And my brain's now going, there's a dog in the background. I need to listen. I can't do two things at once. Fantastic. I think, understanding the value, return on the value, or value, VOI and the ROI together, I think is obviously a super important thing to be able to do. Can you expand on that a bit more and understand how you get that? And maybe you spoke about explaining that, understanding the case for well-being as well. Could you kind of elaborate on that a bit more? Yeah,
so I think, when companies are building some of their kind of like case, or, I'm looking at, how do you measure your well-being? I find that with, a lot of clients that we worked with, companies do a lot, but actually they don't have any track measures for measuring the impact of those specific initiatives. So they'll say, so I will say, how good is your well-being? And they say, yeah, it's great. We have mental health first aiders, we have occupational health, we have, we have our ambassadors, we have our support groups. Okay, how well is it working for you? We don't know, right? And very often you have some of the basic data that we measure in a company, right? So you have sickness and absence rates, you have let's say, employee net promoter scores, you look at kind of retention rates, engagement rates, how easy for us to attract and find new talent. All of those things are very important, but we need to be able to link it up to very specific initiatives to see like how specific thing that we did translated into this increase in some of those metrics. And any of those people performance metrics, organizational level metrics that matters to you, that you want to change, can actually be used as impact measures for as long as you have a kind of chain of reaction that can demonstrate that this increase in this percentage actually came from this specific initiative. And that's what's missing, right? So we make assumption like we do these well-being initiatives, and then we have these, all of these numbers and figures of our sickness, absence, whatever, but we don't have this middle bit. Can we demonstrate that actually this initiative resulted in increase in that, and maybe this initiative had an opposite reaction and actually reduced performance in some other aspects? So that middle bit I find is missing, and this is where we are using our kind of behavioral change frameworks, where we can look at how exactly we can build the case to illustrate that chain reaction. So how do we do that? So first of all, you start with, let's say, okay, here is initiative, right? With that initiative, of course, the first thing that you do want to measure is your engagement rates. Now, engagement rates is not an impact measure. And this is I cannot iterate the importance of this. Engagement rates simply means that you are giving people the right thing, and you have deliver that at the right time, or you communicate it in a right way to reach people, right? So they're saying like, yes, we came here, it resonates with us, we need this, therefore these are high engagement rates. But engagement rates doesn't tell you whether what you are doing it right, whether it actually works, whether it makes a difference, right? Maybe 100 people will turn up for this initiative, but nothing gonna change after them. Nothing going to change in their performance, nothing's going to change in their well-being. So we really need to be able to make sure that when we look at impact measures, we first look at engagement as a completely separate piece of whether we are doing the right thing first. Have we chosen to do the right initiative? And have we communicated and delivered to people in the right time, in the right place? So that's the whole engagement piece. Engagement is not the impact measure. So when you look at the impact measures, now you want to look at, okay, so we've done the initiative, we have specific level of engagement, which shows that this is the right initiative to do. Now you want to look at, so what is the difference that it's making to our people? And there are three things that you want to look at. You want to look at, easiest way to remember is your head, heart, and hand, right? So head is what people know. So what people knew before, and what do they know now, right? So maybe there are specific knowledge gaps that we're missing. And now we can illustrate that because we did this initiative, now they are aware of this. Now they have specific level of knowledge that they didn't have before, right? That's that kind of cognitive knowledge measure. Then you look at your heart. This is how people feel, right? So how people felt before, how people feel after this initiative. So this is like your stories. This is all of the kind of like emotional connection. And then after that, you look at what people do now as a result. So does the fact that now they have different level of knowledge and that they feel about this differently, does that actually translate into change in their behavior? So do they do something different now as a result? And then when you are able to track down their behavior over a period of time, you want to see what are the relevant metrics that you can map into the business that will affect your performance, that will affect your outcomes, that will affect your, pound figure results. These things will be very specific that you can map the kind of commercial value to it. I'll give example with this instead of just kind of talking hypothetical situation, right? So imagine your initiative. You'll say, okay, we delivered leadership. We delivered training to our leadership on how to have mental health conversations at work, right? That's the initiative. you'll say, okay, X number of people out of whatever number of managers attended this, right? So these are our engagement rates. Now, what's the impact? So you say before that, only 13% of managers knew what to do in case of somebody having mental health illness. They didn't know policies and procedures and where exactly they have to refer people to support, right? After the initiative, now we have 100% of people who know exactly the process, policies, procedures, and what is the right thing to do, right? So that's the knowledge bit. How people feel. Now you say, okay, before that, people didn't feel confident in having those conversations, right? And now we see that 86% of managers are feeling confident about having those conversations. So what does this mean to our behavior? Now, over a period of time, you can see that this maybe have had 20% increase in informal one-to-one conversations at work, which means that then that led to reduction of, let's say, formal grievances raised. That also led to less health insurance claims because people felt less supported. And therefore that led to, less sickness and absence rates. And therefore there is maybe a cost saving that you can even link it back all the way to, for example, reduction in your insurance premiums that you will pay next year, right? So you can see how you have this chain reaction where from little training initiative, you can demonstrate all the way to financial returns. And that's what we're looking for, right? If you're building a case for the initiative that didn't happen yet, you actually want to take this process other way around. So start with a problem, right? These are our sickness absence rates. And you want to do the mapping of why this problem is happening, right? So you'll see in this case, like, okay, it stems from the fact that we are not having those conversations with line managers to support them. Why we're not having those conversations? Because they are not confident about doing this, because they don't have knowledge about policies and procedures, and they don't know what's the right thing to do. So they're afraid to have those conversations. So therefore, the right initiative to do is to upskill them on this training, which needs to include those aspects. And therefore, these are the tools and resources an investment required to make this happen. And you can really map it out. Then what's the investment that's needed to make the difference in this return on investment, and how it's gonna change at organizational level.
I have nothing else to add. Well done. Now, what I would say is this can all fall down if we use engagement, if engagement's not there. And that comes from two sides, doesn't it? It comes from the people within the organization having to understand the importance of this. So having a growth mindset and a positive mindset to the training and education they're being put through, and understand the importance and their roles within the organization. But also the culture within the organization as well, right? So if you've got a culture which is toxic or is unsupportive to people training or learning or even being allowed to go to these events or exercises, then before we've even got to the positive outcome, you're then not coming to or getting anywhere near that, right, to the return on investment, because the engagement's being stopped or that's
absolutely. To demonstrate any impact, you ultimately want to look for change in behavior. Right, in your daily habits, routines, ways of working, and you're looking at in that change in behavior and what drives that behavior. These are two things, right? What people know and how people feel, right? And are they given, and you also take that in the context of psychological safety, like what are the ramifications of them taking action, right? Because sometimes people can feel a lot and they know a lot, but they will not take action unless the environment really facilitates them to do that. So I think definitely if we want to look at the value of investment on our well-being, if we are looking at specific ROI of our initiatives. We really want to take that kind of thread of that behavioral change process to look at how is it going to translate into specific behaviors and specific outcomes and at work.
Yeah, love that. And I think that leads quite nicely into the engagement, in essence, in senior leader teams. How do we get engagement for this to happen? Whether that's just engagement with sessions or the engagement within well-being and the buy-in to well-being, maybe let's use that term as well-being as overall kind of blanket cover for supporting people to reach their potential. How do we get buy-in for senior leaders?
Yeah, so there's two things there, right? So one is the participation as in kind of level of kind of engagement with our initiative. So when you look at participation, it's very important that we are giving the right things to right people at the right time, because we cannot say like, okay, let's deliver, I don't know, menopause initiative to everyone. And then we'll say, oh, we only have 3% engagement rates. Why? Well, maybe, it's only relevant to 5% of people. So our engagement rates should be calculated based on 5% of people and whether we actually reach those who find this needed and relevant, right? Mm-hmm. So we really first need to make sure that we are kind of only delivering right things to right people at the right time. Also, you have like support for mothers, and then, you have things like breakfast for working moms at 8:00. Well, it's a school drop-off time. So what kind of, support initiative can that be? So I think, really, really important that when we're looking at engagement rates, it's how exactly we're delivering and is it to the right people at the right time? So we ask what people need, we give them what they need, and we check whether we kind of reach them through our initiative. So that's kind of just in general. When we look at the engaging kind of senior leaders and getting a buy-in into those initiatives in terms of, receiving funding for it and making sure that, we even make them available for our people, then I think definitely we need to be able to map our initiatives to wider strategic objectives that those senior leaders care about, right? They are leaders of the business at the end of the day. They have a lot of pressures and responsibilities and expectations on their own shoulders in terms of what is it that they need to deliver and achieve through that business. So for as long as you're able to illustrate that this initiative will actually help their strategic objectives, will help business to evolve towards that, then you will gain that buy-in. And this framework that I've shared, where you look at this is the size of the problem, this is how much it's costing the business, these are the missing pieces in knowledge, in emotional gaps and behavioral gaps, and therefore this is the initiative that's needed, and you can demonstrate what it's going to cost. For as long as you have that, you will have that buy-in. Mm-hmm. So what is also very important to highlight here when we are kind of looking at the buy-in, that, as you'll know, HR is very female field, right? It's just like nearly 90% of all HR professionals are women. So it's very kind of like gender biased industry in a way. And we have a lot of initiatives where, and a lot of businesses where HR people are not being taken seriously enough. HR do not have a seat at the table. They don't necessarily have a say to influence some of those strategic directions. They don't have a seat at the board, for example, right? So what I'm really proud of some of this work that we are doing, that actually when we mentor and we partner up with these female HR managers, we take them to the level of directors, executives, and so on. If we give them tools to be able to demonstrate the impact of their initiatives at organizational level, that actually drives their personal development, that helps their drives their career progression, that balances out this kind of gender disparity in income and pay and so on. So I think also it's very, very important to realize that if we do well-being right, if we don't just take it as this kind of like fluffy well-being that just sits with HR, which is, non-revenue generating department, so it's only a cost, right? If we really look at well-being as the right people support initiative, if we put numbers and figures behind it, if we look at the strategic approach in terms of how it can benefit the business, the sustainability of the future of the entire organization, it's actually good for people, it's good for the business, but it's actually good for these HR women themselves, because it will tremendously help their career progression and pay.
Yeah,
And recognition. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So we're nearly at the end, and so I should reflect on what you just said first. So yeah, in regards to engaging those senior leaders, I think having the numbers, and as you said, using that case study and being able to flip it on its head and saying, this is the pain points, these are our KPIs, which are maybe not where they need to be, and reflect on it, going, look at the investment and the impact that what we're doing can have. I think senior leaders and leadership are very impact focused, and trying to find what, I think you said this, is that pain point or KPI which their key focus is on, and then being able to use what you're planning to do and the impact it's going to have on that KPI. And so for every organization wants their people to perform at their best, right? I think for the majority of the time, okay, so how is what you're going to do going to impact people's performance? Okay, can you get the numbers behind that and to prove that? Okay, so the investment is this, and this is what the return is going to be. As a guesstimation, you should that senior leaders seem way more inclined to buy in when there's statistical benefits to it all, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love that. I love the way you kind of explained how to get senior leader buy-in through showing statistics. But it is a hard thing to do, isn't it? Senior leaders can be quite negative within their mindsets, and maybe don't, as you said, don't allow HR to have a seat at the table. And so I'm going to ask this question before we close up, actually. How do you get HR a seat at the table?
Yeah, exactly that. I think I probably already answered, when I was kind of talking about kind of more of this kind of like gender equality and so on. It's if you allow the tools, knowledge, awareness to that HR person to understand the kind of the wider strategic objectives of the business, then they can tailor their initiatives to fit that wider picture. I think we're really dismissing very often a lot of like people initiatives, a lot of like well-being initiatives, ED&I initiatives, and it's like, oh, it's nice to have, it's just there, because we have to tick that box. But, it's not seen as strategic priority, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of that comes from the mindset of leaders. And I see as well that a lot of clients who are approaching us for some help with, with well-being strategy, with their culture change initiatives, with their leadership development, they actually have female executives, or they have a female executives at the board as well, right? So you can see that by having that woman at that level will result in the entire organization being much more kind of people-oriented, much more human-friendly. Just, I'm maybe a bit biased here, but I think women just a little bit more kind of caring people in general, right? And yeah, I think it's so important. So, yeah, I've lost the track of what the question was. Hopefully I answered it.
Don't worry, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I think what you've shared is super helpful. I hope a lot of people have helped. I found it useful as well. Going to finish up the session as I always do, and looking at your top 3 tips. What are your kind of top 3 take homes for showcasing the value and the ROI and the case for well-being within a workplace?
Yeah, I think first, before anything, is to listen to people, because very often we put a lot of initiatives out there based on what we think that people need, not what they really need. So I think it's so important that we have kind of like listening mechanisms. And I don't just mean, once a year engagement survey, how much do you like this organization and so on. It actually takes, psychological safety to create safe environments for people to feel safe to speak up. Sometimes it takes an impartial party to come in and listen and extract some data and insights and to say, this is what your people really feel, this is what they really think, and this is what's really these are their kind of struggles and experiences. So I think definitely, like, first is really listen and have these kind of continuous feedback loops and mechanisms so you can make your initiatives relevant to them. Because, before you even measure anything, you need to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So yeah, listening first. The second thing is co-designing with people. So again, if you want well-being initiatives to make a difference, it should never be something that's done to them. It always has to be something that's done with them. People usually know what they want and what they like. They don't always have the area of kind of like health expertise and so on to understand the complexity of their drivers of their behavior and what stops us from being our best. So obviously, we need to balance that out, but we still need to co-design with them so it's delivered in a way that it's engaging and it's relevant for them. And then finally is that everything we do should reduce reliance on external providers and build the internal capacity for your people to look after themselves and leadership capacity to look after their people. If you are building an initiative that will make you reliant on external provider for the rest of the times, then you are just pouring money into that external bucket. If you're paying somebody else money, make sure that they are building that internal knowledge, skills, emotional capacity, self-regulation, healthy self-expression, healthy habits, and healthy routines to do it for themselves. And that applies both at individual level, right? What we can do as humans for themselves. How can we be better? How can we do better? What does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to sleep well, to eat well, right? A lot of people have very little knowledge about this, right? So can we give people tools to help themselves? And in the same way, any external providers coming in, are we actually equipping business with the data and insights to say that these are the priorities, these are the next things, this is how you can build your organizational resilience, this is how you can build your leadership capacity to do things well. So I think, those three things: listen, co-design with people, and make sure that when you look at external providers, you build internal capacity rather than creating that kind of external reliance on them.
Love it. I love it. I think, listen, great, gauge your data, understand your data. And then I think that leads into your second one, doesn't it, in regards to co-design. Yeah. And things have to make an impact. And so whether that's internal as an organizational standpoint or internal as a human being standpoint, has to make a difference.
Yeah.
Evelina, thank you ever so much. Thank you everybody who have joined. It's been a pleasure. This will get onto YouTube at some point soon, and then be on the podcast some point soon. So if you do want to listen to this back and take more of the information in, keep an eye on the Wellbeing Chat on Spotify. But for now, thank you so much. The next one will be next week with Charlotte Stebbins, looking at similar things, looking at how we create well-being and implementing the best things for well-being, especially from a different cultural standpoint as well. So keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, thank you, Evelina. I really appreciate you for joining me and giving me your time.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone.
Stay where you are, Evelina. But goodbye, everybody else, and see you all soon.